there's been a heist in every country, and I know it, even if it's a small one. I'm Lory Martinez, founder of Studio Ochenta. The company's been around since 2019, primarily producing multilingual podcasts. We started out with English, French, and Spanish, which are the languages that I personally speak. And then we quickly grew to now representing up to 27 languages across original series and client series. One of the things that we really wanted to try out was true crime, because obviously it's something that everyone knows is popular in every language market. And it's actually insane because it is something that we've noticed from the beginning of Ochenta, that there are genres that are more popular in one country than another. And when they are represented, they're a little bit represented differently. For example, in Latin America, you have a very popular kind of interest in supernatural and like horror kind of podcasts. In Spain, there's more interest in sports podcasts, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, you still have this overarching interest in true crime. All of that is, I think, we can trace it back to the beginning of time when people were interested in crime and violence, because that's something that takes them out of the normal, order of society. That's something that we're exploring in Ochenta, especially because we work across all these languages. It's a trend that we saw, and that's why we developed Caper as our way of doing true crime. So all of the shows that we make have this very positive message. I like to call us like audio Pixar. We do a lot of experiments, and our storytelling is very much emotional and fun. And even if we do get to dark topics, they're still very much, represented in a positive light. So when we wanted to do a true crime, it was a challenge because we had to kind of say, okay, so if Ochenta does a true crime, how can it be our version of that? And we knew immediately that we didn't want to do a violent true crime story. And so we did nonviolent true crime already. And we decided to kind of focus it on capers and heists. And to make it even more Ochenta, because Ochenta is very, international, we decided to make the season international. So every episode is a different country's heist and what it meant for that country. And in the sound design and in the narration, you're kind of going into the space where this thing took place, this heist, and how it basically influenced the country and how people reacted locally, and then what was the impact of it around the world. And what's really cool is that you find out about heists that you never really thought existed. I mean, because you hear a lot about very historical heists in the UK, the US, but things that you'd never been exposed to because you don't necessarily speak Mandarin or Japanese. You might not have heard of, the Chinese bank heist that was the biggest in China, where it was a banker who he basically worked in the bank, and then he decided to steal money in a briefcase and then buy a lottery ticket. And basically if he wins with that lottery ticket, then he would win the money. But then he basically reimbursed the bank, and it was like the perfect crime. Like he would win, and then he would reimburse the bank. Nobody would know, but he tried it 3 times and then he got caught. Interestingly, Italian was the hardest language to make this work in, not because the Italians aren't interested in true crime, but because there's just that market is very underdeveloped in terms of just massive podcasts. So we couldn't do like cross promotions in the same way that we do with English, for example. The marketing strategy for that show was a little different, and we didn't see as much success. But I don't think that the theory is, my theory is not that the true crime doesn't work, because there have been other successful true crimes there. It's that just like in terms of scale, the audiences aren't there yet. But I think they will be in coming years. The big platforms are actually hiring people dedicated to each language, which they never did before. Even when Ochenta started, it was very much like the new thing. And, international companies, they work in silos. So we'll have somebody who's like in the UK, and that person will never talk to the US person, or the UK person will never talk to Spain, and so on and so forth. But that's changing a lot now. Caper is kind of at the center of that, being like, checking all the boxes. Like, this is a multilingual series. This is released in multiple languages. And it's got that international angle. One of the challenges of doing research for this is if you don't have the content in English, it's not as easy to get research, for example. So if you're like doing a story on a Swedish heist or a Norwegian heist, you have to speak that language to be able to get the best scoops, because Otherwise, I mean, it hasn't been reported internationally, so it wouldn't necessarily be translated. So one of the things that we decided about all of the episodes that we've done is we had to pick languages that we'd already worked in to get the right stories and be able to properly, tell them again. So I think if we were to do a second season, we would now expand it to the next round of languages, because there's been a heist in every country, and I know it, even if it's a small one. And they all kind of tell a really interesting story about the cultural moment in history when they happen too, and the influence that they have on people when they're in the news and all of these things. So it's exciting to be able to kind of share that with the world. The cool thing is that whenever we work on a show like this, we work with a copywriter and we make sure that it sounds natural to the native speaker. So it's not just a verbatim translation. And the challenge always ends up being, how casual do we want to make this? Like, what is the tone of the show in the other language? If we take the French example, if we make a French true crime series, do we want it to sound like a Radio France show, or do we want it to sound like a young person who's kind of into true crime and is more related to our audience, like which is that vision for us and who is going to be the most likely to find our show. So I think having that knowledge really helps, and in making the show authentic as well. Those are the challenges that we face every time, like honestly, is just having really long conversations about whether something is correctly translated, or if, are we stereotyping here, or is this sound design too, like, yeah, is it too much of how do I put this? Like an imagined vision of what that world would be like. For example, when we did the UK episode, it was about the Great Train Robbery. We had like a conversation about, okay, so if we do the sound design and it's supposed to be like in the 60s, are we really doing cliche 60s rock music, or are we gonna try to do something a little bit more original? And so it's always that kind of question of authenticity and making sure that we bring people into that world without feeling like we're doing something that's already been done before. I think this show is showing this international feeling that we all have, which is we'd all like to be something that we're not a little bit, and it's available in all these languages, so there's no excuse to not be able to access the story.